Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's talk with the co-founders of First Literature Project and 2022 to 2024 Guildhall Community Artists in Residence, Scheider And Wunetu Wequai Tarrant. My name is Anthony Madonna, and I'm the Pathway Director of Learning in New Works here at Guildhall. Yay! Woo! Yeah. So I'll start by giving a bit of context to the exhibitions. I'm going to do the old school thing of reading both of your bios because you're both quite impressive humans. And then we'll have a conversation for about a half hour. We'll do a little neighbor chat and then a short Q&A, just so we all know where we are and what we're doing. So the First Literature Project proposes to support Native nations in their efforts to maintain and further their languages, narratives, and oral traditions. Employing a new immersive storytelling platform, 3D video is mixed with virtual reality to recreate the timeless experience of sitting face to face with a storyteller. This installation platforms the story Padaway, written in English by Princess Elizabeth Chi Thunderbird Hale, and translated by her granddaughter, Wunetu Wequai Tarrant. Alongside the VR installation, there are video works by the Shinnecock Language Revitalization Collective, Ayin Kutuwonk, which Wunetu has formed and will speak next Thursday, and interviews with members of the Shinnecock Nation through a partnership with the Patagohan Medicine Lodge. Wunetu Wequai Tarrant is a member of the Shinnecock Indian Nation. She grew up with her family on Shinnecock. Wunetu has been inspired by her grandmother and matriarch of the Thunderbird clan, Elizabeth Chi Thunderbird Hale, to promote cultural preservation and education. She received a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from Alfred University, a Master's of Native American Linguistics and Languages from the University of Arizona, and is currently a linguistics PhD candidate at the University of Arizona, focusing on the reconstruction and revitalization of the Shinnecock dialect of the Southern New England Algonquin. Wunetu has worked closely with the Algonquin Language Revitalization Project on designing curriculum and activities for teaching Shinnecock and related dialects, and continues to research best practices in language research and production of materials that will be accessible to community members and teachers regardless of linguistic education experience. She has continued to advocate for Indigenous students as the Julia and Bernard Bach Fellow in Special Interest Groups of the Linguistic Society of America. Scheider is an independent filmmaker and theater maker living on the east end of Long Island. In addition to his original and film and theater work, Scheider heads video production for the Sunny Center in Ireland, the world's only post-exoneration residential community, and produces films for the Bard Prison Initiative, his alma mater. As a theater maker, Scheider co-adapted, produced, and directed Ray Bradbury's short story, The Murderer, and Kurt Vonnegut's novel, Galapagos, into fully staged productions, and premiered with his collaborators an original slapstick comedy, The Summit, right here at Guildhall. Woo! For film, Scheider has produced and directed the documentary The Sunny Center about death row exonerees, and co-produced and directed the documentary The Tree Prophet, which won the Audience Award in the San Francisco Independent Film Festival. I can go on and on to talk about these two, but I think we should get to it.
Amen.
Yeah, you can give them a round of applause.
Yeah.
So I wanted to, it took me a while to figure out how to start this conversation because I've been sitting next to Christian Wunetu for 2 years. But I wanted to start by learning more about your grandmother, Elizabeth Chi Thunderbird Hale. If you could share more about her, her presence, and her influence on you and your work now with us.
Okay. Thank you for that lovely introduction. Akwai ni tompa Wunetu Wequai na Swiss, Shinnecock na Cheshire ka Shinnecock na Tap, My grandmother was really influential in so many people's lives out here in this area and pretty much wherever she went. She was a school teacher, a culture bearer. She promoted keeping the language in use in our daily lives. And she really just put her energy behind trying to make a better future for the next 7 generations. She was a co-founder of the original Head Start program in Schenectady, New York, upstate, many years ago. And it's now become a nationwide program, helping provide daycare services for folks who don't have a whole lot of money to put into that. So really her impact is a lot larger than I think I could even imagine, nationwide. But especially for the Shinnecock people, she pushed to open the Shinnecock Cultural Center and Museum, as well as the Wenatchee preschool and daycare. And she, as the daughter of Chief Thunderbird, my great-grandfather, who was the driving force behind reestablishing the tradition of having a powwow and being proud of our culture and reconnecting in a much deeper way with other tribes in the region, and just kind of continuing that fellowship, among us natives, and also welcoming in folks to come and learn about us and dispel some of the stereotypes, some of the myths that are surprisingly prevalent even to today. So she really was an educator and an advocate for us, for all of us. And it's just really been an honor to be able to work on a story of hers and to breathe a new life into it using the Shinnecock language, which she heard as a child growing up, but fluently she spoke English. So I feel like this is kind of the next step in using the lessons that she left with us and creating new materials, new stories, or new renditions of older stories for us all to share, really. What we're doing right now is we're creating resources, and that's something that I believe that she did, and it's just been an honor to work on her story and to speak her words in Shinnecock language.
And Christian, you have history with Wunetu's grandmother as well. You both met at Hayground. Both your grandmother and your father really were co-founders and developers of the Hayground School. Can you speak about your experience listening to these stories as a child, how that forged this friendship and impact?
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. It's very nice. I'll tell a funny story about that. My dad, when they were starting Hayground School, his favorite thing, he would come home from the meetings or whatever, and he'd say, "Oh my God, Elizabeth Hale. She is so powerful." I remember that as like a 4-year-old. It's one of my first memories about Elizabeth, but there were many such memories about Elizabeth because she had a way of telling stories that was just unbelievable. Scott knows, the storytellers in the audience know. You don't always know where that power comes from, but she had it. So that's my history with that. But yeah, Wunetu and I got to be the audience at Hayground, and she would come in and teach to us. And it's funny, this project is all about remembering stories. I don't remember the specifics of the stories because I was 4, and I don't even remember like my own parents at 4, But I remember the energy of how she told stories. And that's a huge foundational thing for this project.
And so there's a lot of context to this work. There are a lot of inspiration points to this work. The value of having 2 years to develop a project allowed us in the first year to really focus on process and meeting people who would support your work, or add another dimension to it. So I want to go back to like the first few months where you went on several research trips, and the first one being the opportunity to meet the late N. Scott Momaday, and then to also sit with Godfrey Reggio.
Yeah.
And if the two of you can speak a bit about that experience.
Take it. Wunetu, please.
Excuse me. That trip that we took was really fun. So we went all the way out to Santa Fe and Albuquerque as well, was it?
Yeah.
Albuquerque.
Yeah.
To meet with N. Scott Momaday and his daughter Jill. And it was such an honor to meet them. Previously, before this project, I hadn't actually read much of his work. But Christian was thrilled and really made it happen. And I feel like that was really just a great opportunity, for the both of us to meet someone who is so accomplished in that arena, in that realm of writing, and so well known as well, and being a staunch advocate for speaking truth and speaking from his perspective and really sharing that without any concern for what somebody might think. So I thought that was really just a great opportunity. It was an honor. And I feel like I got a lot out of the other part of the trip as well.
Yeah, totally. Talk about that one.
So we got a chance to stop by. My Aunt Judy lives in Oklahoma, and she's friends with the director of the First Americans Museum, which just opened in 2019. And that is a Native American museum run by natives and designed, by the various tribes that are in Oklahoma currently. Like, as you may know, many tribes moved to Oklahoma or were forced there. And so now that is home of one of the most diverse populations of Native people in the country. And this museum really was an inspiration because they are doing things in a more culturally reflective and respectful way. They are repatriating items that are coming from other museum collections. They're finding out who are the families that belong to these items, and they're asking those families permission to put those items on display or just returning them if that's the wish of the people. So I feel like that portion of the trip and getting a behind-the-scenes tour of the museum and speaking with the director and seeing their displays that they have. It's a 360 screen display where they have storytelling going on in several rooms. So it was really an interesting intersection of addressing the history of how museums have operated in this country and worldwide, and making new strides towards doing things in a different, more respectful way, and also incorporating technology, which was pretty fun as well.
But also simple things like a pedestal on a floor with a light and no object. Theater.
And I think when you walk into the first literature exhibition, you can see a lot of visual references from that experience in the space. It is open, so after this, please take a moment to walk in. I have a few follow-ups, but can you speak a bit about meeting Momaday?
Yeah, so the first literature project, the title of that comes from something I'm pretty sure I heard him say. I can't find it, but he said it when we met with him. And the idea is that the first form of literature is the spoken word. And something is no less literary because it's not written down. In fact, it's more literary because somebody bothered to remember it. So that was sort of my whole interest in wanting to approach what I think could broadly be called a sort of native pedagogy of story, which I am not inclined, I don't have that history personally. But it's super compelling to me as a theater maker and a filmmaker. And though this project is primarily for and by Native peoples, and it's not really about us non-Native folks, there's a lot to learn there. And so that was a huge motivation for me. And then also my favorite filmmaker ever, this guy Godfrey Reggio, who did a film called Koyaanisqatsi, if you've ever seen that. It's one of the greatest miracles in cinema. It was a wordless, non-narrative documentary that came out in theaters and did really well. I mean, it's never happened, it won't ever happen again, as far as I know. Phil Glass did the score. Anyway, that was based on a Hopi prophecy. So I wanted to kind of get with him and be like, how did you go about the process of approaching these themes and these topics not being Native? That was a big question that I had to deal with, and was something that we dealt with throughout the whole process. Still learning about that. But he was super amazing and has 1,000 things to say. I don't know, what do you think of Godfrey? He's wacky.
Yeah, it was an experience walking into his studio. It was like, it felt like we're going into Willy Wonka's chocolate factory.
Totally.
But it was affirming to hear his process of reaching out to communities, speaking with elders, asking their permission to tell these stories. And, I think at the time, this was done like the 70s, wasn't it?
Oh my God, a long time ago.
Yeah, quite a few years ago. So I think it was a unique experience that he had, and I think he tried to do those stories justice in that abstract presentation that he used with the film. So yeah, he spoke about asking to use the title, to use the Koyaanisqatsi title as well. He didn't feel like comfortable doing that initially, and then he was asked to, actually, by the Hopi man that he knew, and he lived in Santa Fe, so there was a very large, very powerful contingent on the reservation there and around, and Koyaanisqatsi means life out of balance, and so his whole film was about modernity. So they called it. I don't know.
And hearing the two of you speak about these experiences. What's coming to my mind is this phrase we said quite a lot working together, is that we can only move at the speed of trust. And I think that's really prevalent when you sit and listen to the interviews that you conducted over 2 years with several leaders on Shinnecock in partnership with Potawatomi Medicine Lodge. So can you speak a bit about that process? Of meeting people, sitting down for recordings each month, and so on.
Yeah, there are so many more stories that we wanted to get to, so many more folks that we wanted to interview, but I'm glad that we got what we did, what we were able to capture on film, and I'm glad that this project, the way that we're moving about collecting the interviews and displaying them, is really cooperative between the interviewees and the First Literature Project. We had some interviewees that were not comfortable being on camera at first, so we conducted audio interviews. When they saw that more and more people were becoming interested in the project, they then wanted their on-camera interview. We had requests to keep the interviews only within the Shinnecock community, which is valuable in itself because there are some stories that are just so personal, it's very hard to speak them out loud, and who is it for? What's the purpose of speaking it? It's really to speak to our children. We had interviews also that the interviewee requested that their interview be made public, as public as possible, put it in the Southampton Library, make sure that it's out there and not just sitting on a shelf in a closet somewhere or on a hard drive. So it was really an uplifting process to feel trusted with that material and their words and their stories. And I feel like this is a unique approach that the First Literature Project is taking, and we're putting the direction, I guess, of the content in the hands of the interviewee. What is it that you want to share? What is it that you think is important for our children to hear? Because so many of our historical resources, our books, our pretty much anything that we have written about Shinnecock history, a lot of it is from an outside perspective. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the author, the anthropologist is very responsible, but they're very few and far between. So it's important that we begin this process of recording our own history and making it available for students in the community and in the larger community.
And in recording your own history, can you share a bit about Ayun Kutuong, the language revitalization collective that Wunetu started, and the materials they've gathered in the relationship with Library of Congress?
Yeah, so the Library of Congress, this was a wonderful opportunity that just kind of came across. Guildhall's desk while we were working on the virtual reality project. But it had been a goal of mine to use this time off from the university, this 2-year span of time, to further my research and to also test out a language plan that I have, that I've been cooking up for a couple of years now. We are in a unique situation with having very few written resources on Shinnecock specifically. We have the largest resource is the first book of the Bible. It's the book of Genesis, and that's the only resource that we know specifically is written by a Shinnecock person.
Can you give a little context as to why that's the only book?
Yes. So that version of the Bible, it was 1655. It started in 1653 actually. And it was produced by a missionary, John Eliot, in Massachusetts, somewhere in Massachusetts. And what happened was, Shinnecock are very social people. All of us coastal people, we travel a lot, we visit, and we have family in other areas. So there was a young boy, Kakano, who was visiting family in Massachusetts when he was captured and enslaved. And eventually he landed under the care of John Eliot, the missionary who was looking to convert Native people. So with the help of Kakano, he was able to translate that book of the Bible into a language that is mutually intelligible by many of the tribes along the coast. We're very closely related to Wampanoags, Narragansetts, Mohegans, Unkachags. There are many different dialects, but this one specifically came from Kakano, and he was from here. He returned back here after his enslavement ended, and settled in the area. So that book, there were other books of the Bible that were translated by other tribal people from other nations, but that one is specifically Shinnecock. Another reason why there's very limited documentation is that I believe Thomas Jefferson actually came out here and did a documentation project for the Unkachog Nation and for Shinnecock, because they were different. And throughout the course of transporting that documentation material, I think the boat was either... It was looted, yes, it was looted. And so they saw a box of papers, didn't throw that overboard. And so the Shinnecock documentation ended up in the ocean, and the Unkachog documentation was preserved. So I think there's like 1 page of Shinnecock documentation that survived that. So that, in combination with the boarding school system and the concerted efforts by the U.S. government to destroy Indigenous identity, destroying the language was one very quick way to do that. And it only took a few generations really to get to the state that we're in right now. So what we're doing, this process of reclamation includes learning how to understand linguistics, because Algonquianists have been studying our languages for many, many years, but they're not concerned with speaking to us. So they can speak their linguistic jargon, they can publish as many books as they'd like on it, but none of that's useful to us if we don't know how to understand the linguistic determinations and everything that they use to describe languages. So what we're working on right now with Ayamkatuank is training community members to become familiar with the resources that are available, learn how to compare that material with other language material from other tribes that maybe still have fluent speakers or have a more robust language program at the moment. Everybody's kind of in this, this state of trying to really hurry up and get this documentation down, because the folks who still have fluent speakers, a lot of those fluent speakers are elders, and COVID has been awful, and it's really kind of a race against time for a lot of folks. So this language collective, they became familiar with the language, how the grammatical structures work, and they became familiar with other tribal resources. We relied heavily on Passamaquoddy Maliseet material, Abenaki material. We also looked at Mohegan and Unkachog material, and we were able to reconstruct pieces that we weren't able to find directly in that book of Genesis in the Bible. So I believe that this training program and the 3 young women who helped me do this, this is the first step in really reclaiming agency over the research process and really being able to establish our own reliable materials that are accessible for teachers to use, because teachers and classrooms are asking for it. You know, the kids are asking for the language, and it's their right, they deserve it.
Mm.
Yeah. And what's amazing, like, as you shared, like, Shinnecock people, you are an open people. Like, you're really embracing, like, forging a path. And not only is all this material, like, totally for Shinnecock, it's being held by Shinnecock. It is not the property of Guildhall in any way. But the research that you have done through the Library of Congress, their Connecting Communities Digital Initiative, the translation work, the video works of Ayin Kutuong, a few of the interviews with permission are all going into the library's digital archive so that they can be accessed by Shinnecock, or by peoples. And it'll be the second collection of Shinnecock language on the Library of Congress's collection, the only other being the translation of the Elliott Indian Bible. So it's so monumental, the work that you are doing.
Yeah, it was a wonderful opportunity.
Yeah. Whew. Now to the VR aspect of things. Christian, for the masses, can you define a 3D stereoscopic landscape video?
Start the clock.
Yeah.
Okay. Your head has 2 cameras in it, a left and a right eye. Your brain is the computer that interpolates those images. So we did the same thing. We took 2 really fancy high-definition cameras, put them right next to each other with really good lenses on them, and you film a subject about 7 feet away, and the difference between those 2 images is what creates the illusion of depth. But it's the same illusion that we all experience in our day-to-day lives. So it's actually not so much of an illusion, it's exactly what you see. Oh, and then, okay, VR. So VR, the really quick version of that one is...
You can spend a little more time.
Okay, fine. Really quick. So VR is a spherical screen, meaning it is... So the headset that's in there is really advanced. It puts 2 it's about the size of your thumbnail, 2 screens inside of the headset, and the headset tracks where your head moves, and the screens in front of your eye shift the information as if they were bigger than they are. So they're subbing in information. So as I look left, the headset is communicating with the file, which has information all around you, and it's presenting you a portion of that file at a very, very, very high resolution. We were lucky enough to get this Gardner grant. One of the great ironies of this project, being as David Lyon Gardner was the first white dude to arrive here, but you know, it's amazing how these things work out. And using his money, generational wealth some might call, we were able to purchase these devices which might preserve some generational information for Shinnecock folks. Kind of cool. So anyway, more tech things? What do you think?
Audio too, though.
Oh, yeah. So Barry, who also makes VR films, with Nina, who's sitting there, audio also is spatial. So if a branch rustles behind your head, but you're looking here, your brain and your ears working in tandem sense that it's behind you. So with really new fancy headphones, it can place a sound as if it's behind you, but it's related to your body in that space, not to your neighbor and not to the room. So what that means is that the file is registering where you are, and the headphones working wirelessly in tandem with the visual piece are also able to place a sort of audio image, if you will, same way that the image is placed visually. And it took I wasn't a VR specialist when I began this project, but what's interesting is that no one is. It's so new that like even the best people in the world, this place Cora we worked with, they weren't really sure about it either. We figured it out as we went. And we're still figuring it out. And it's really fun to be at the forefront of a medium. Not that I care about medium forefrontness, it's boring. But in this case, it was very fun.
And that aspect of like not being, like this being your expertise or learning about it, it's part of this residency program. You know, these are two professionals, they're very accomplished, but over the past 2 years, you've spent the time experimenting with new ideas. So this prolonged residency has really allowed you to gain a new skill set and put your PhD work into practice, which we are so happy to support. But Wunetu, can you share a bit about the choice to use VR to tell the Podaway story in this way?
So the choice to use VR was really based on trying to recreate the face-to-face experience and active listening involved with storytelling. So when you're physically in the space of the storyteller, they're noticing you there. You know, you're listening into what they're saying, but there's something more physical about it, I suppose. And VR seemed to really be the way to go. I feel like when we're looking at a two-dimensional screen, like a TV screen, we come into this passive state. And I feel like something like this, when we're talking about the tradition of storytelling, remembering what the speaker said is very important. So the physicality of, you know, being fully immersed in the landscape, or being able to, I guess, imagine that the storyteller is directly in front of you when it's actually on a VR, it really changes that state, and I feel like it provides a better active listening situation.
And just a quick little note about that. This
It
like
doesn't have to be quick.
so. What's so annoying about VR is trying to like throw a dinosaur at you, which is cool. It's fun, right? And it's interesting, but storytelling is a really old form, and you don't need a lot of bells and whistles for it. So when we were approaching this, we were like, how can the medium actually go away? So when you think about VR, I don't know if a lot of people are trying to think about it in a sort of minimalist way. We were approaching the opportunity of VR in a hyper-specific way, which is just like, how do we make the person feel like they're in front of you? A little bit of depth and a lot of emptiness in the beginning. Before all the landscapes come in, the beginning is Becky Genia telling you the story of the origin of the universe. And you don't actually need a single thing other than her presence. And paradoxically, not using all the VR stuff, just having her there in front of you, is the most shocking special effect in the whole thing. The other stuff is cool, but that's the thing where you go, oh, I never thought this could be used that way. And that intuition came to us really early in the project. We were like, oh, I think we could do that with VR. And I hadn't seen that before, so we were excited about that.
Nice. And my final question for you, it's slightly cheesy, but it's fine. What are your intentions for audiences when they see the work of Ayinka Chuang? They listen to the interviews, they experience Becky and your grandmother's story in this new way. What are you hoping that people walk away with?
It's my hope that people are able to gain a little bit of perspective with what we're presenting. In the interviews especially, they are so personal, you know, being told by, a lot of them are my aunties and uncles. But they present information that we aren't really taught in public schools or even in private schools for the most part. They speak about a period of time out here within their lifetimes and what they've experienced, the ups and downs, the challenges. There are many challenges. They speak about historical events, the rise of the whaling industry, and how that affected the Shinnecock people and Montauk people. And I really feel like it is helping to raise an awareness that we are able to tell our own stories and our own histories, that we do have the authority to speak on such matters, and that we're capable of contributing to a monumental revitalization effort even without a degree. You know, if we can support each other, then we're capable of really doing anything. And I think that's what I want people to walk away with.
I would say that in our very polarized country, the solution to people not getting along or not understanding each other is respect. And so I felt my responsibility in this project was to put in the best possible light a culture that is extremely worthy of respect, that has a lot to say, and we should listen.
Thank you both. Before we turn to a Q&A, I'd like you to turn to the person next to you, behind you. Have a 3 to 5 minute chat. I'll time you. Imagine you're sitting in your car on your drive home. What would you be talking about? Go.
Do you need a snack? Are you in need of a snack?
I'm okay.
Yeah, now this is also like drink some water, eat a snack.
I don't want to invite anybody.
It's so good. Thank you. We got to ask Anthony some questions about how the hell do you deal with the two of us for 2 years?
I don't know if we want that to be public.
Yeah, maybe not. Yeah. Huh?
Let's stick with 3 questions, and then if it feels good, maybe we'll do 2 more.
Sure, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Gather around, class.
Wrap up your comments.
And that's why
All right, everybody. I hope that was fun. I hope you got to know your neighbor, learn something from each other. Yeah, we're gonna come back. So we're gonna go for 3 questions.
3.
We're gonna see. We're gonna go with 3 questions. We don't need to move a mic around. We're a pretty small group, so just go for it.
I was fascinated in like in the early 20s and 30s. I think it was John Hammond went around the country recording music that he thought would disappear. He felt would disappear. So he went into all sorts of different, areas. Was there similar, when you say materials, are there audio recordings that are part of those materials from back, as far back as audio has gone, or is it just visual? I could not understand that part of what the material was.
There are in existence some audio materials, and keeping in mind that we've never really stopped speaking the language entirely. I think only the oldest audio material that we have, because our documentation doesn't go so far back as to be recorded on wax cylinders or that
Right.
old. I think probably the oldest audio material we have is from Princess Madonna, or Cousin Lois, as we refer to her,
Which is when?
Lois M. Hunter. She recorded in the probably the late 60s to early 70s. I think it was 74 when she passed away. So she was also a culture bearer and a proponent of keeping the language going. A teacher, anybody from the reservation, all of our elders would say, "Where'd you learn that?" "Oh, probably, well, Cousin Lois said this." You know, she was really one of those, a powerhouse of a
But
woman.
is there more of it to keep the language alive? I mean, still?
When it comes to
Part of your
when it comes to the actual audio documentation, there really hasn't been anything. I think there was one resource that was at the Library of Congress that was recorded by another relative, Gladys Cuffey, and it was a lullaby. And so I was so excited to see that it was there, but then we found that it was just a record that it had been there, and they had lost that audio recording. So
We're gonna record it.
as unfortunate as that is, we still sing that song, so we still know that song. And that song itself is linguistically significant because it actually uses some Lakota words as well, so a completely different language family. And we can see how that song maybe had traveled. So that by analyzing that, we can actually add something to the linguistic volumes about Algonquin languages. But in terms of materials, primarily we're working from written materials, and we're doing a comparative study with other languages or other dialects and languages that are very similar. In Algonquin languages, the grammatical patterns are very stable across most of them, and there are Algonquin languages from the West Coast up through the border, through Canada, pretty much on the northern border of the U.S., through New York, then down as far as North Carolina. But then there are also central Algonquin dialects from people who moved from the Great Lakes region mainly and had moved down to Oklahoma. So
How is it written? Is it common writing, or it's all different? Sorry, I'll stop.
pictographs?
With the winds and because there was I just remember, well, I had applied for some projects, this is many years ago. We both did, actually. It was a project in, it was more the Algonquin area. It was, where was it, South Dakota, do you remember? Yeah. And it was, and I was the one who was like researching all this stuff, and I found all this interesting stuff. I mean, I hadn't, focused on this, but what I was like totally blown away by was that the sounds of a different movements and rocks on the floor, and the scraping, and these were all in these pictures, and you could actually see them. You hear the wind going. And I had this, anyway, I got really excited about the project, and it was great, but then the funding was taken away, unfortunately. But it was really interesting, and I bet there are a lot of those things that we're just not aware of.
In
Movements.
Yeah, in terms of a written language? Is that what you mean?
Abstract.
Oh.
Right, it's like
Are you talking about
John Hay,
depictions?
writing, the sounds of silence, you just, yeah.
Well, there is a Cree syllabary, which is an Algonquin language. I wouldn't say it's mutually intelligible, but they have a lot of the same words that we use. And that syllabary was written, I think, I can't say what year it was, excuse me. That syllabary was delivered to the people from a medicine person from that area, and again, I'm not sure exactly which Cree it was, but they developed their representation for the basic sounds in their language, the basic syllables that they had, and it was etched into birch bark. And so birch bark etching was also something that we practiced out here. In terms of a linguistic representation, I don't think that was really common out here. I don't think the Shinnecock language was a written language. I think it was spoken mainly. But there are other tribes that definitely have writing systems and language writing systems as well.
And bead work and the motion of the beads. I mean, there was so much stuff.
Thank you.
The exhibit's really amazing. It's beautiful, and thank you for it. Can you talk about the work itself and the collaboration? And I know you all worked together for 2 years, but what were some of the surprises? What did you expect at the beginning versus what actually happened at the end, apart from the power of your aunt just visually, as just individually sitting there? What were some of the expectations initially, and how the final result compared to that?
Take it, Anthony.
I think in supporting the two of you for 2 years, to receive like this opportunity from Creators Rebuild New York, and we're one of 90 institutions in New York State to receive this, one of 2 on the east end of Long Island, the other being our partners at Moss House.
Woo.
Yep. Guildhall got the opportunity to really support and develop your work. So much of what you're seeing in this exhibition was not what we planned or thought of in the very beginning. We had no plan of forming a language revitalization collective.
I had a plan.
You had a plan, but it wasn't until we meet weekly, the 3 of us, and it wasn't until we started meeting and learning more about each other and where they were thinking of taking the project, where we would say, oh, all right, let's try and find funding for that. And we have an incredible staff that is saying like, okay, let's support this. Or as we were looking at the final exhibition to include the interviews through the partnership with PML and to include the work of Ayin Katuang, that came on much later in the exhibition idea and thought plan. So given 2 years, we were really able to trust process over product, which I think allowed us to create quite a beautiful product.
Yeah, one funny story is that when we first received the grant, we said, oh, this is really great, we'll have salaries, whatever. And we kind of all looked at each other like, well, but we pitched a VR film and it's going to cost like a fortune. What are we going to do for 2 years? You know, we don't have enough money to make a VR film. And then, and that's the truth. We were like, well, we're going to do some interviews, it should be cool, you know. And we're kind of like, oh my God. I was like, maybe we'll do like a prototype, a couple frames worth or something.
Yeah, there's just going to be a pop-up in the lobby or something.
Yeah, it was going to be something not like what you're seeing in there. And, you know, I'm very proud to say, Wunetu, cheers, we're like 5 for 5 on grants. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, Gardner Foundation, Library of Congress, you know other ones that Guildhall got that I don't even know about. I mean, it's a fortune that went into this thing, so it's really cool. Really cool.
Shout out to Julia Muscat.
Yeah.
Julia!
Julia is our grant writer who grew up here in Sag Harbor, and she is so devoted to this project and both of you.
So sweet.
And really believes in it, and she sought out other funding for it.
Oh yeah, and that's Andrea Grover, who I was like, hey Andrea, I have this idea for this VR project, it'll take 2.5 years, and she's like, yeah, go meet with Anthony, I guess. And then, you know, we got along, but I mean, Andrea's she's an angel. She's an angel. It's really Andrea. Okay, please.
Thank you. Very moving. Particularly as, you know, we looked
Oh, really?
at categories, just very, very moving.
Cool.
You know, didn't want it to end. You know, kind of wished there was VR for the whole room.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so there would be, you know, wanting more. So I guess my thought or question is, it's stories. You know, there's stories and stories, and you think of Aesop's fables or the gospel parables. So I guess that Wunetu is, as you've interviewed, is there more in the story that you want to communicate to the world? I mean, is it a Manhattan play type thing? Is it story? I mean, the stories are beautiful in themselves, but is in your own thinking a purpose to communicate something to the wider world? And if so, what might it be?
I think about that one. I suppose being able to uphold a storytelling tradition is work and a privilege in and of itself. I really feel like over the years, the accounts of who we are and our history have been skewed through the different perspectives of the people who are writing about us. So with this and the founding of the First Literature Project, what we're hoping to do is to give the agency back to the storytellers and to emphasize the importance of that tradition. Emphasize the importance of being able to, I mean, even if it's 2D, low tech, even if we do have just a filmed interview with a community member, the ability to be able to hear them speak remotely is something new. Because if you would have asked me if I could get my Uncle Tiger in there on camera, no, that was out of the question. See, she knows. Yeah. Yeah, and a portrait too, yeah. So he's one of the most knowledgeable people within our community about our history and about our language. He's not a linguist, he's not an academic, and he's not the kind of person that's gonna go out there and run a whole program. He's gonna know what he knows, and if somebody wants to know something, maybe they'll come and ask him. And there's that process, that relationship that is built within that storytelling process. And I feel like that's something that was highlighted with this project, the way that we did it.
And obviously, if I walked in, it wouldn't be happening. I stand behind the camera, and Wunetu asks the questions. And that's really the truth. That's the success of the project. This kind of thing relies on people feeling comfortable with the person who's interviewing them, because there's a long history of not feeling comfortable with people who are interviewing them, obviously. So.
And it's very exciting that more and more people now are coming up to Wunetu to want to be part of the project. School districts are reaching out to learn more about the work, see how they can put it into their curriculum. So there's a real ripple effect happening, which is very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, we're sort of at time. So with those 3-question minimum, that was great. I want to thank a few people before we leave. I want to thank my colleagues, Andrea Grover, our executive director, Julia Mascali, our grant writer, Kristen Eberstadt, our chief philanthropy officer, Melanie Crater, our director of visual arts, who really supported the exhibition phase of this work. Mm-hmm. Amy Curran, our chief creative officer, who's really getting the word out there. We had a packed opening weekend. And I want to encourage you to come back to Guildhall. The galleries are always free. There's incredible exhibitions on view. In addition to First Literature Project, we have Spin a Yarn, curated by Ashley Jablonski, and Ted Carey, Queer as Folk, which is from our permanent collection, curated by Matthew Nichols. Next Thursday at 6 p.m., Wunetu will be joined by the members of Ayun Kutuong, her mother Christina Tarrant, for a conversation about the language work, and that will be moderated by Andrina Wickintosh-Smith. And then there are so many programs coming up at Guildhall, both talks and lectures and workshops around this exhibition, but also our summer season is announced to members, and it's going to be announced to everyone. Next Tuesday. That theater looks really good. So check out everything that we're doing, and thank you so much for sharing everything today, and thank you for joining us. Goodbye.